Is it Kat, Katy, Kate, Katerina? What is your name?
That's honestly the first question people ask me when they meet me. So in my passport, it says Katerina. But then I know that British people cannot pronounce it every single time. It's like Katrina. And then I'm like, okay, that's not quite my name. I don't really like it.
Welcome to English with Lewis. Let's go!
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to English with Lewis, and we have another fantastic guest. So I'm eager to get started and I'm buzzing to get going. But I have a big question first. Hello, hello. Is it Kat, Katy, Kate, Katerina? What is your name?
That's honestly the first question people ask me when they meet me. So in my passport, it says Katerina. But then I know that British people cannot pronounce it every single time. It's like Katrina. And then I'm like, okay, that's not quite my name. I don't really like it. So then I'm like, okay, it's going to be Kate. Simple for everybody, right? But then ever since like my high school, my teachers just kind of go, oh, yeah, okay, Katie. And I'm like, no, no, Katie, Kate. And then it got to a point when everybody was calling me Katie, and I was like, no, it's not Katie, it's Katé, Katé, without the I. And then it just came around to Katé. So I just added to my name like this apostrophe above the E, and then started calling myself that. But it's completely fictional. It's not actually, I mean, should I change it in my passport? That's the question now,
Maybe you can just make up a new name for yourself.
right? Yeah.
My name is Wardrobe. Nice to
Yeah.
meet you.
And no, you have to like make a random accent with it. So it sounds cool. It's like not wardrobe. It's like wow, wardrobe. It's not,
That could be your new surname. You could be Katé Wardrobe.
wardrobe.
Okay, so that hasn't clarified a lot, but what it has clarified is that it's not Katie.
Exactly. Honestly, at this
All of
point,
the rest are okay.
anything but Katie. Yeah, just call me this, call me that. I don't know, just not Katie. Like cannot stand Katie.
Wonderful. So I'm sure many people are familiar with you and your content, but for those of the viewers who haven't seen you before, they don't know who you are, where you're from, what you do, could you do us a favor and introduce yourself?
So my name is Katé.
Katé Wardrobe.
Yeah, my name is whatever you want it to be, honestly, at this point. And I'm from Estonia. I'm 21 years old. And 6 years ago, I moved to the UK to study. And now I live here. For now, at least. We'll see what happens next.
Okay, so anything could happen in the near future, let's see. But let's go back in time to 6 years ago. Why did you choose to move to the UK, to London?
Initially, it was my mom's idea, which I couldn't believe. Like one day she came to me, she was like, would you like to go to high school in England instead of like Estonian high school? And I was just like shocked. I was like, what do you mean we could do that? Because when I was little, my mom went through a divorce and then she had to move to another country. So in my head, I would never think there was like a possibility like that's also for me. It was like, you're joking, right? This is not funny. Like April Fool. Ha ha ha. So they sent like my parents sent me to like the first so in England we do A levels, and then before that people do GCSEs. But when you're in international, they need to kind of involve you in the community before. So they ask you to do IGCSEs, which is like international kind of. So you get the feel, you get to like you do your own like international community. So for a year, that's what I did. I did like 7 subjects. And it was the craziest thing ever as well to do suddenly, all my biology lessons would be in Estonian before, and now they're in English and they're asking me things like, oh, what is this? And I'm like, I can tell you what's called it in Estonian, but not in English. So it's like a lot of like translating, like physics as well. I'll be like, well, what do you call this and that? Even like mathematics, when it's like, divide, subtract, I was like, just draw and I will do it. I cannot like speak mathematics. I can do mathematics. So all of that, but it was lovely. But then from international community at A level, suddenly you're thrown to all the British people. And that's where the fun starts, when suddenly you realize like your English is not good enough. So your whole like community, it was fine to like interact between each other. But suddenly it's like it's British people who speak English since their birth. And so I did A levels. I did film studies, business, and English literature. when I did English literature, I thought, it's going to be fine. Little did I know I was going to do Shakespeare in like another language, and the teachers would be asking me like, oh, Kate, what does this mean in this passage? Like, what is this word? And I'll be like, out of like 4 people in the class, 3 being British, I'm like, do you think you're asking the right person? I've got no idea what this is.
Like, I
But
would have no idea
else.
either. Like, I'm terrible at analyzing any kind of literature. I don't really read anyway. And Shakespeare, the language that is used is so complex and old-fashioned and outdated. It's funny because you used a nice little inversion there, which made you sound a little bit Shakespearean. You were like, oh, little did I know.
Yeah, yeah.
See, it did work. This English
It did
literature,
work,
it worked.
honestly. Yeah, like I think that's what boosted me the most. It was like the most painful experience of my entire life, possibly as well. Like it's very hard because I was obviously always the lowest in the class because I was never gonna surpass the people who speak English.
Yeah.
So in a way, like it was a bit demotivating constantly, but then at the same time, I was like, not a lot of people are doing English literature like in general, like at this kind of age and all. And also like with this education at A levels, you can choose your subjects and only do 3 subjects. So when I came over, I was like, what do you mean I don't have to do like physics, chemistry, mathematics? I was like, what is
You
this
learn
cheat?
how to
Oh my God.
divide and subtract and add up for nothing in English.
Yeah, yeah. And now I just have to do Shakespeare. Does Shakespeare divide, subtract? What do I do now?
Awesome. It sounds like it was quite difficult to adapt to all of this. I mean, if I think about myself when I was like 15, 16, if I had moved to another country and not known the language fully, I assume your English was already pretty good, but not native level. But like, I would have been so scared. And like, did you get homesick when you first moved over? Because I would have been like, Mummy, help.
Honestly, like I would go home quite frequently, so that helped in a lot of ways. But the thing with like, especially like boarding schools and international boarding schools, is that you will be with the people in the same situation with you. So like my best friends were a German girl and a Chinese girl. So we were like completely like different backgrounds, but because we were like together and we were roommates, it was like the coolest thing ever because we were like in this together and we would go out and then come back and share like this British person told me this today. What does this? This person said, off you pop. Where do I pop? What do I pop? What do I do? So it was more like a bonding experience. So if I had to kind of be submerged within just British community, I feel like that would be really hard. But it's when you go to like international schools, when you realize you're all in this and you're all experiencing like the same thing. It was more exciting, I would say. I took it definitely like as a challenge. And because I didn't know how long I was gonna stay, so every time I stayed more and more, like I didn't know. I thought it's like, oh, I'm only here a year. And I was like, oh, I'm only here like 2 years, and then I have to go back. And then I was like, oh, now I can actually apply to university here. It's like, so I took it with the like, okay, I'm gonna do like the best I can, take the best I can, like communicate as much as I can.
Okay. I mean, you said it was just like year by year, and now what, 6 years later, you're
Yeah,
still in London.
yeah, honestly, I don't
Really
know how that
making the most
happened.
of every opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's like honestly for me, I blinked and now I'm here. Like I remember starting my like first year like a year ago. It was like suddenly it's like you blink and you're already in this country. You're within the community, you have British friends and you're like, what is going on? Where am I?
Just going over some expressions that you used and that come to mind right now, it sounds like you were all in the same boat. You were all in the
Yeah.
same situation. Your 3 roommates, well, the 3 of you, so the Chinese girl, the German girl, and yourself, you were all in the same boat. And you said, off you pop.
Yep.
What does it mean, off you pop? When was this said to you? Who said it?
It was a teacher, and he said it as a joke when, like, I brought him homework, and then we just chatted for a bit, and then he was like, "Oh, I have work to do. Off you pop," which basically means like you can go now. But off you pop is not in any like rude way. Same like a lot of Brits say, "I'm gonna pop down to the store," instead of like "I'm gonna go to the store." It's a lot of like "I'm gonna pop in," "I'm gonna pop by," "off you pop." It's like a very like it's like pop. It's like you disappear.
No, perfect. So someone says off you pop, it's like relatively politely saying like, go on now, you can
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to see you, but I don't want to be rude about it. So just like get out.
Exactly. Off you pop. And as you said, also, you can pop by somewhere, you can pop to the shop. In other words, meaning that you can go to the shop. And we also use pop as a way of saying like put, to put something somewhere kind of
Yeah.
delicately. I was staying in a hotel the other night and then I was just looking at the TV, trying to turn it on. And then I was like, that's a nice little sign. It said, when you pop this down there, something similar,
Yeah.
which meant when you put this down on the table. I took a photo and I was like, this is British English.
Yeah.
And then the final expression I wanted to go over is that you said it's like you blinked and then 6 years later you've got English friends, you're still in London. We can also use the expression in the blink of an eye.
No.
So something happened really, really quickly. It happened in the blink of an eye. And just clarifying that blink is something that you do involuntarily. It just happens naturally. And wink, I can more or less do it, is when you do it with one eye and maybe you're making a joke or you're flirting with someone, possibly, and you wink at them. Cool. Moving on from these expressions, let's go to Estonia, because I've never been. I doubt many people watching this have been either. So what is Estonia like?
I mean, normally when I tell how great Estonia is, then people kind of go, but you moved from there. So I'm not the greatest advertisement for my own country, but honestly, it's amazing. But it's amazing if you love great weather.
Yeah.
Other things, fun fact about Estonia, I say we as in, I was there when it happened. We created Skype, Wise, the banking app that is global right now. Also Bolt, like taxis, scooters, like a lot of startups did come from Estonia. So we have a good like environment for the startups, people setting up business. I've set up my own business a couple months ago, and it took me maximum 15 minutes on the laptop as I was in England. I set up a business, which is like mind blowing to even like think about. Yeah, like we've got so much nature. So a lot of people when they come to Estonia, they come to our capital, Tallinn, and they see kind of the medieval town, they get the vibes, and then they're like, oh my God, this is this cute country where everything is so old. Not really. That's like the impression you'll get like when you come for the first time. But if you explore other cities, we got so many like swamps, like ponds, nature, forests, like Baltic Sea. Like for us, a lot of people swim even like in winters. It's so lovely if you love nature and don't really like people, because most of the time you're walking and you're just like enjoying your walk and there's no people, which was a huge shock for me when I came to England, especially London, when there's like 3 people on every single street. Anywhere you go, there's gonna be like at least like 3 people with you. When I'm like, I need some privacy. Where are you all coming from? So like it's great, but definitely if you want to go to Estonia, I would recommend summers because it's a bit warmer, it's a bit nicer, have a great experience. In winter, we go to like minus 20 degrees Celsius, and winters can be rough, snow. So if you're not used to it, summers, highly recommend. Take a car and go like around the country to explore.
I mean, it sounds cool. I remember watching a documentary, I think it was a few years ago, about how like high-tech Estonia had become. And I think it was all about like having like digital ID cards and that everything you can do with a laptop, as you mentioned, setting up a company. So like there are lots of banks in Estonia as well. And I think like, I don't know whether the tax situation is quite encouraging, let's say, for startups and entrepreneurs. So it sounds like a place to be if you want to be working online and doing all these things, which is what you're doing at the moment. So
yeah,
is the door still open to go back to Estonia and leave London?
As much as I do love Estonia, the industry of like film and media and social media is just not as big, and it's not English speaking. which is fair because it's Estonia. So obviously, like, I would love to live there. But in terms of like building a career, I would say like personally for me again, like if you're into more like startups, building your own like companies, apps, anything, 100% like place for you. In regards with like media, that's why a lot of people ask me like, yeah, but why did you move? You tell it's so great. And like, yeah, it's amazing, but there's like pros and cons. It depends really what you want to do.
Okay, interesting. And I love speaking about food. I don't know what your experience was like having your first like fry up and roast dinner and fish and chips and stuff like that. But before we get onto that, typical Estonian dishes. So what are the foods that you eat the most?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question because a lot of people ask me like, what's the national Estonian dish? And it's hard to pinpoint at one because Estonia, like Russia, had such a huge influence from USSR. So a lot of our food is kind of Eastern European. At least like that's what I think. I've been trying to research, and when you Google, a blood sausage comes on the screen. And I don't really recall myself eating a blood sausage ever in Estonia. So it's like, really, do we eat that? One thing that we love to eat is like cabbage that is marinated. We love that. We love a lot of soups. But just in general, it's more like homemade food. So we've got a lot of like mashed potatoes with like meat on the side and then the marinated like cabbages. It's different house to house. So people eat like completely different things. But we've got a lot of restaurants as well. So it's normal to go get a pasta, sushi, like
You can eat basically whatever you want, but one thing, blood sausage, at least not in your family.
I don't like every like because I tried to research it like as much as I can because I was like, well, what do other people eat? And then it always comes down to the blood sausage, and I'm like, really?
Really?
Like,
I don't remember any of that.
I'm like, where do I even buy it? Like when I go to the store, it's not there. So I'm like, who made this up?
And blood sausage, of course, or also known as black pudding, is a very
Yeah.
typical ingredient on a full English breakfast. So, English food, go on. What do you think about it? Usually, English food receives a lot of hate. And if you agree with that, go ahead. I won't be offended, I promise. But yeah, what's your experience been like?
I mean, English breakfast, honestly, I love it. I normally go for vegetarian option because I feel like there's more fresh things on your plate. When you go for like full English, it feels like you're eating meat and then eating that with meat and then eating that with meat. But when you take a vegetarian one, it gives you mushrooms, sometimes it gives you avocados, so it's a more balanced meal that I love like so many times that when I wake up and I'm like super hungry, I'm like, okay, it's an English breakfast day. Like, let's go get it.
Time to
Fish
pig
and
out.
chips. Yeah. Fish and chips. Depending on the mood. When I just moved, I used to be more of a fan. My issue with fish and chips is that it's not balanced. So in Estonia, when we eat like potatoes, like anything kind of fried, we balance it out with vegetables. So if
Mushy
fish and chips,
peas?
see, still not getting it for me. Like they're not fresh. I need more like tomatoes. Throw in some like cucumber, some kind of like salad. And before you say coleslaw, no. I mean, like, that's the thing when you come from like other cultures and you're not even, it's not about food, it's about how you eat, like what portions, what proportions, because they say like, oh, 20% of your plate must be this, and then 40 this and 40 this. So when you come from that and your like mothers and grandmothers being like, where are your vegetables? And then you go get fish and chips, and in your head you're like, where are my vegetables? Where did they go?
I mean, there's nothing better than just beige food.
Yeah, that as well. It's
It's
like,
fish. Everything's just the same color. Really appetizing.
yeah. But one thing I loved so much for Christmas, you guys eat pigs in the blanket,
This is all meat, though. What about
right?
what about the percentages?
I know, I love the name of it. Like,
Okay, don't like the taste, but the name's great.
it's great. But like again, it's like for Christmas dinner, like my first Christmas dinner we had at my school, like this whole like roast kind of pre-Christmas. And I look at my plate and I'm like, so I'm eating meat with meat with meat with meat with and the Yorkshire pudding. And then I was like, So Yorkshire pudding is not a dessert. I was like, oh, I was being scammed. Okay. So
we have lots of different puddings that are not puddings. If we look at Yorkshire pudding, black pudding, I'm sure there are more, but right now they're the first two that come to mind. But yeah, with a like Sunday lunch, kind of Christmas dinner, the good thing is that we do have some vegetables. Usually you've got some carrots in there, some peas, kind of like frozen peas, but not mushy peas. Then might have some cabbage. We might have some broccoli, some cauliflower cheese, which is lovely as well, because cauliflower for me, not very nice. But then when you roast it with loads of cheese, I mean, of course it's going to be nice then. But yeah, pigs in blankets. For those of you who are not familiar with this, we only really have it for like Christmas dinner, but they are little sausages, like party sausages, like little chipolata almost, and they're wrapped in bacon. So it's like double pork, but it's delicious. It's so good. I wouldn't want to eat it all the time because, of course, it's not very healthy. But when you do have it, it's like a little special treat. And Christmas is the perfect time for indulgence, endless chocolate, 10 desserts. You have your beef, your turkey, and then your little pigs in blankets. It's happiness on a plate.
Yeah, but then there's also cocktail sausages. And when I heard that, I was like, so why you want to throw a sausage in my cocktail? Like, can I just have my cocktail in peace? I was like, what's that supposed to mean? Like, what do you do with it? So it's like always different types of like this sausage and this sausage. And I'm like, well, I call this sausage, this is sausage, and this is sausage. Like, why do you have all the fancy names for it? But like, that's what makes it like so fun, especially like during Christmas times when it's like, oh, do you fancy a cocktail sausage? And I'm like, oh, go on then.
It's interesting because you sounded very British right then. And many people might be wondering and asking themselves like, wait, does Katé Wadrobe speak more like American English or British English? Because you just said, do you fancy a cocktail sausage? And do you fancy, this question is really, really British. No Americans are going to ask you, do you fancy a drink? It would be, do you feel like a drink? Or do you want a drink? Or would you like a drink? But as British people, we love the word fancy. Do you fancy something? And fancy also means to like someone in a possibly romantic way or in a physical way. And it's in particular used by children, teenagers. So it's like, oh, I really fancy him. I really fancy her, meaning that I am attracted to that person. So British people, we use fancy all of the time for many different contexts. But returning to a question, Kate, do you speak more British English or American English?
It's interesting because normally in a normal conversation, I will be sounding more American, or like at least like a lot of people tell me it's like international accent. Even though like I've lived in the UK for 6 years, I feel like British accent never quite settled on me like properly. I feel like I was forcing it quite a lot. And for me, like, it just doesn't sound natural when I have a conversation with a Brit and I have a strong, like, British accent. I feel like I'm mocking them, and it's just not, like, my personal, like, personality. So then I went to the United States because my family lives there. And I lived there for 3 months, and I came back with American accent. It just stuck to me ever since and not letting me go. And I'm like, okay, now I'm back in London. People ask me if I'm a tourist here, and I have to explain to them, no, I've been here for 6 years, and with this accent to prove like, no, darling, it's been a while of me here. Yeah, accent, I don't know, like, cannot explain to you.
Like, when you're like, are you taking the piss?
Are you taking the piss? Like, yeah, like, I don't know, like, but that's the thing as well. With a lot of people who come here, they kind of adopt the British accent. So you kind of feel forced to as well. But sometimes, like for me personally, I just sounded odd. Like I look at my previous videos when I recorded, and it's like I'm forcing. It's like I'm like, I'm being somebody I'm not. When normally, like, when I speak fast and I'm passionate about something, this is like the kind of accent I use, something like in between. Because with, especially like speaking other languages, that could be like a linguistic thing. In British English, you have to make a lot of emphasis on like certain parts of the words, whereas like Americans more like flowing, like personally for me. But British is like, what do you fancy? Instead of like, would you like a drink? It's more like in a straight line versus when it's like, oh, I'm gonna pop down to the store Like you have to have certain like intonations that sometimes are just not natural to people.
No, I know what you mean because like I speak Spanish, my Spanish is good. And then in the beginning, I always tried to copy Spanish speakers as much as possible and like impersonate their accent. And it works to a certain extent. But then the way that they speak naturally is very, very fast, very loud. So then when I'm trying to copy how they speak, like it's hard for me to do it because naturally I'm kind of very mellow. I speak very slowly. I don't like screaming and shouting. So then at the beginning, I'd maybe change my personality to speak better Spanish. But then over time, I'm just like, I don't really care. People are always going to know that I'm not Spanish and I'm not a native speaker. They can still compliment me on my Spanish, but then be like, oh, where are you from? And I think that's just maybe accepting it as you get older. It's like, generally speaking, we care less and less about other people's opinions as we grow older. And I think that's happened with my Spanish a little bit because I used to be a bit self-conscious about not being able to pronounce the properly. And
There you go.
yeah, but then when I try put it in words, it like sounds like I'm choking. It's like but yeah, basically I think as we continue to speak the language and get older, we care less and then the real us comes out. I don't know if that's how you feel with your British/American English.
I mean, honestly, it's what about mix it yourself? Like, you're not supposed to fully speak like a British person. Like, it's hardly, like, it's nearly impossible. Like, you might sound very good, but then a British person will hear you and be like, I can tell that you're not. So it's like, it's a point where you just find whatever is comfortable for you. And you just kind of like accept that, like, that's what makes me myself, that, I learned this language. And it's kind of being proud about it. Like, if you have a slight accent, like a lot of people like try to go on my accent when I was just learning. A lot of people were like, well, you sound like weird, you sound this and that. And I'll be like, that's what makes it me. That is my other language that I speak. It's normal. Like, I'm not supposed to suddenly like I'm not British for that reason. Like, otherwise I would have sounded like fluent.
No, 100%. And just on that note, you mentioned off the record a little bit of a confusing, funny story that happened to you because you were speaking a little bit more American than British in London and you were asking for directions. What happened?
So when you look at my videos, sometimes you'll be like, surely that didn't happen. It did. Most of like my stories are actually real life. A lot of them are from my sister because she moved to the United States when she was 3 years old. So that has affected a lot on this child. And she's 6 now. And when we speak with her as well, I'll be like, oh, do you want to take the lift? And she'll be like, oh, you mean elevator? So like most of my videos are like already like real life scenarios. But this one time, it was my 3rd day in London. I just moved. I was excited, also kind of like scared. So I went to explore, went to the Buckingham Palace, and that was just a guy who just like wanted to say hi. And I wasn't really comfortable. I was like, hey, I think I'm just gonna go to the subway. Like I'm going. And he was like, oh, I would love to like, kind of take you. I know where it is, because I was looking at the maps. And I was like, okay, I guess that's fine. It's not so far away. There are people around. I was like, it's cool. So we reach the subway and I look around and he's like, there we are. I was like, but I don't really see, well, where is it? And he's pointing at the subway, as in like the sandwich shop. And it suddenly all made sense to me because on the way, he was also talking about like, oh, do you want to get a foot long? And I was like, foot long train? Like,
Very small.
I'm like, what's the difference? Like, how do I choose a train size? Like, I just like take whatever takes me home, whatever like comes to it, that's it. And it was like the funniest. He didn't find it funny, so I only found it funny. He was like more confused. He was like, "Oh, you didn't mean the subway? Like, oh, you meant the tube?" And I was like, "Yes, the tube." Oh my God! And it's such a
Damn it.
like, Yeah, it's such a London thing as well. Like you will see so many memes about it and people like mocking it and be like, oh, it's not the metro, it's the tube. No, but really, like if you try to ask somebody for like underground and tube are the most common words. If you try to use like kind of anything else, a lot of British people might be like, oh, what? Because like we just say the tube.
Exactly. And the subway in the UK is a sandwich shop. It comes from
Yeah.
America, but it's not the underground train. But you learn from experiences. There's a lesson learned. And now you're always going to remember it and have this great story of you walking around London looking for the tube with a guy who was thinking that it was helping you and is like, oh, yeah. So do you want a meatball marinara? Do you get all the salad on top? And you must have been thinking like, do they give you free sandwiches when you get the tube or what? What's going on?
Yeah, and the thing is that I knew about the Subway sandwich shop, so I don't know like why it didn't click for me. I think because I was just walking and I just moved and I was trying to understand his accent because like British people sound very different all across, even like different parts of England, like Liverpool accent, Manchester accent. Sometimes it's like for me, like at this point I've lived here for like 3 years and still like some accents sometimes you hear and you're like, could you like say that again, but like 25 times slower? It's like listening to Adele. Sometimes I listen still to Adele and I'm like, well, with singing, like obviously it's clear. But when you watch interviews, like, all the memes about her just like going with an accent, and you're like, do I really speak English? Like, you're making me question myself.
It's like level C3 or D1 or whatever it could be, that if you're listening to someone who has a really, really rough Scottish accent or a really rough Scouse accent, even Geordie as well, and then East End like Adele, then people, if they don't really open their mouth and it's not clear what they're saying from the context, then you have to like really, really pay attention and then hopefully have some kind of subtitles and then go back and listen again. But I mean, if you can more or less understand this level of people, then I think it's clear that you speak very, very good English.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people get disencouraged. Like my dad once, when he went, I think, to Wales, he was like, I could not understand a single person. I was like, this is normal. Like sometimes I cannot. And like, I've been speaking English for probably like around 8, 10 years now. Like it's completely normal to not understand. Like a lot of people kind of encounter these situations when they come to London and they're like, I cannot understand anybody here. And it's like, that is completely normal. You're not like supposed to. There's dialect, there's like slang. There is so much that comes with the language that you're just not gonna, because it doesn't come with subtitles, as you said as well. It's like normally you watch a show and you can have subtitles, you can like rewind. Here it's like, they just gonna say it once and you just gonna smile and wave and nod and leave.
And be like, sorry, I didn't get that. I didn't catch that. Could you repeat? What did you say again?
Where are the subtitles? Can you put them on? Like,
I mean, I think this happens even to native speakers. If you're like in a pub and loads of people are screaming and shouting, then it's going to be hard to hear. So then at least if it's not over and over again, where you're like, what? What did you say? Pardon? Excuse me? Say it again. As long as it's just once, twice, maybe, I think you get a pass. And then third time, if it's strike 3, you're out.
Yeah, you just gotta smile, pretend, leave. That's it.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah, you're like, and then you realize it was a question that they asked, and you were like, yeah. And then they go, I actually asked you a question. And it's like, really? What was it?
So anyway, going over some things, you mentioned that you moved to London, you did your GCSEs, then your A-levels, then you did your degree also in London, and you recently graduated. So in a nutshell, how was your university life and what are your plans for the future? You said you set up your company in Estonia. So yeah, tell us about exciting news.
So with education in university in London, my goal was to finish it as soon as possible. I'm not gonna lie.
Like, how did that?
Yeah, I was like, this is my #1 criteria in terms of like saving money as well, because in the UK we don't have many grants. Like in the US, it's very common like to get a scholarship, to get like money off things. In here, it's just not common. Like if only you're like top student, you'll get like a slight 2% discount. which is like still. So like my like criteria were time efficiency and money efficiency. So I found a degree that was only 2 years in filmmaking, like teaching you everything, like A to Z. Is that what we say, right?
I mean, British English would say A to Z.
Z, that's the
Z
one.
would be American.
Oh.
God damn it.
See, that's the problem. Like my teachers always tell me, if you like speak, you just commit. You either speak full American or full British, and I've avoided this rule ever since.
I mean, the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah, like in brackets, that was American. Brackets, this was British. But anyway, so I found this degree teaching you like A to Z, like completely everything. So one day I'll be like a film director. Next day I'm holding the boom already, you know. Third day I'm like working with the camera. It was amazing. Personally, for me, it didn't provide as much like clarity what to do next. So, and that's how my classmates felt about it as well. So obviously as well with the film degree, initially, that's why I started doing social media. I wanted to go into film, but I didn't know like steps, how to, where to, when to. I didn't know what to study. So like a lot of people, I panicked, you know, and I just chose like film degree. A lot of people go for marketing degree when they don't know like what exactly to choose. So yeah, it was a great experience in general. It was very non-like what you can imagine about like typical like, yeah, let's go to the pub. That's what my classmates did. Completely fine, go for it. Wasn't like truly for me. I would like leave the class and just go back home and like film videos, like work on my content, all of that. But yeah, in general, it was great. Like it was my first time being in London, so like the first 2 years, first year I was like full in studying. And second year, I was already like working in an internship in central London in an office in like editing company. Cannot say too much because I signed an NDA. But it was like the coolest thing ever for like a year. I felt like I was pretty much doing a 9 to 5 in London, like commuting every day, living the like, you know, wake up, get on the tube, have like breakfast, central London, like colleagues who are like 30, 40-year-olds, like British people getting so much like insight and like how real people like live, not just like students who come abroad. So like super lovely, cannot like complain. And so now the life I'm living now, I try to apply for jobs here after I graduated for social media, but the market here is incredibly competitive, and as well it's not relative to the prices. So you will be paying a lot of rent, but to pay that there's not like there's no correlation between like salary and a good paying job. Like jobs here generally are like 30K per year, like starting at least at when you just kind of move, settle down. And then the rent will be around 24,000. So it's like, how am I supposed to live on the 6,000 per year just like for the tube, which is also expensive, like, you know, all of those things. Obviously, love and hate relationships still. In London, I'm seeing like what it does for me. How can I like what can I do here? But yeah, so I've lived here for 3 years, and each year was like first a student, then like a 9 to 5 regular job, and now it's like self-employed working for myself. And it's like completely 3 different lives. I feel like I've lived here for like 10 years now at this point.
Yeah, I know. Wow, you've had so many experiences that many other people wouldn't have had by the time they're 25 or 30. I mean, you're only 21, right? You're a little baby and you've already lived so many lives.
I already get like middle life crises because of that. And then I'm like, well, I'm not supposed to have that right now. Like, how
Wait,
old
does that
am
mean I'm
I?
going to die when I'm 40? No,
Yeah,
it's not.
sometimes that's what it feels like, honestly. And sometimes I wish I was a bit more easygoing with that. But living abroad, I feel like changes you like a lot. Like you don't have the time to like just run around too much. Especially like living in London. You just don't have time to run around like at all. It's all like, oh, I need to pay my rent, pay my rent. And in this way,
Yeah.
like that's maybe why I'm gonna move out of London at some point to have like a slower pace life, think about what I want, because now it's kind of like very much run, 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 just like don't stop.
Now, I think 100% if you have to pay rent and rent is expensive in London, as everybody knows, like some things can be cheap if you're in London and you want to eat, you can go to Tesco and get a little meal deal. And I imagine you're used to doing that quite a lot.
Yeah.
But as a freelancer as well, you know that how much you earn kind of depends on how much you work. Of course, you've got to be lucky as well, but in simple terms, the more you work, the more you will earn, and then you'll be more relaxed about paying rent and securing your future. And then especially if you are creating something for yourself and you started your own business, then you can look at the long term and think like, okay, all of this hard work is going to pay off because then I'll buy a private island in the Caribbean when I make my billions. So then it's not as difficult to motivate yourself to work when you're not very motivated.
Yeah.
So yeah, on that note, a nice little bit of motivation for anyone who's thinking about going freelance and starting to create content on all of these things. And let us know if you've had any kind of cultural shocks or communication issues when you've been traveling abroad, if you've had a subway tube little problem like Katé Wardrobe had. But no, thank you so much, Kate. It's been a pleasure to hear more about you, about your story, and about your plans for the future. And I'm sure everybody loved to hear all of this too. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. This was amazing.
Well, who knows? Maybe we can do it next year when you're living back in Estonia. Who knows?
I'll give you another insight. I'll be like, okay, so since then, for me, like 5 years has passed. Now I am doing, I don't know, I'm a yoga teacher, and this is happening.
Exactly. I'm a yoga teacher, and then at the weekend, I go to space and travel to Mars. I'm looking for aliens. Another lifetime. And Kate.
Yeah, honestly, that's what I love about this life. You can be anyone you want, and it sometimes starts with social media. I started when I was 10 years old, and I never thought I could be like self-employed just because I make silly videos like during the weekends. But here we are.
Here we are. You were ahead of the curve, an early adopter.
Yeah, I didn't know TikTok was gonna come about. So if it didn't, probably nothing would have happened. So thank you, TikTok.
Thank you, TikTok. So thank you, everybody, for watching. And as I said, do not hesitate to add a little comment and tell us about your culture shocks that you've had. And once again, Kate, it's been a pleasure. And who knows, maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do this again.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, and see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and see you next time.